And joining us now, 25 till the top of the hour, 800-941-SEAN is on number, is the one and only Patrick J. Buchanan. In his latest article, he talks about all these Republicans that have been mysteriously reluctant and resistant in terms of supporting Donald Trump. And by the way, that includes people that made the pledge to support him, like Jeb Bush and Lindsey Graham. And you can add John McCain to the list, Ted Cruz, and John Kasich. All these people, and John Kasich in particular, I find what they are doing destructive and hurtful, and I've talked at length about it last week, and it made a lot of news last week. And Patrick J. Buchanan raises this question. Will they set aside political and personal feuds and come together to win in November, after which they can fight over the future of the party and the future of the country? Patrick J. Buchanan, welcome back.
Good to talk with you, Sean.
What's going on, sir?
Well, not too much. I think you're exactly right. These folks, I believe, they really should make a call here. It's far better, I believe, if Donald Trump wins the election and the Republicans who disagree with him on trade or foreign policy or on the border, we all fight this out with the Republicans in charge in the White House, the Supreme Court, the Senate, and the House. Then we fight over who was responsible for the defeat and the loss of the Senate and the loss of the presidency and the loss of the court.
You know, to me, people are asking me, well, why do you support Donald Trump? And I'm like, well, number one, I promised in March of 2015 when I was at CPAC interviewing Jeb and interviewing Cruz and interviewing Trump and interviewing Marco, I said, I'm going to support who you, the people, decide and give as much airtime as I can, because I think that was in the best service of my audience. And then in 2016, I did a speech, and at the speech, I said the same thing. I said, a lot of you are going to be angry and emotional and upset if your guy doesn't win, but there's only going to be one winner. And I pledge I'm going to support the winner. Who are you going to support? Everybody stood up. Now we see that these politicians are playing politics in a way. And my argument is, Pat, the Supreme Court. My argument is the economy. My argument is Obamacare. My argument is energy independence. My argument is building a wall. My argument is vetting refugees. My argument is sending education back to the states. Now, as a conservative, those are all conservative ideals and principles. And after the debacle of Iraq, where I wanted the war, you were against it, and you and I argued at length, but if you're going to fight a war, don't surrender and give back the land that Americans fought, bled, and died for.
Well, let me say that about these Republicans. I think they really it's really time they've got to bite the bullet and be honest. It seems to me that the only argument you can make for not supporting, first, I don't know how you make the case once you've pledged you're going to support someone and then back off your pledge. And if you do, I think you've got to give a reason. The only reason I can see, because to do that is really to advance the cause of Hillary Rodham Clinton to be president of the United States and all that means. The only argument I can see is if somebody stands up and says, the man is simply unqualified by temperament, by knowledge, information, by his erratic behavior, et cetera, to sit there in the Oval Office and control the nuclear arsenal of the United States, and I cannot go for that. Therefore, I accept the fact that my opposition may help bring Hillary Clinton to the presidency. It seems to me I don't see any other thing other than the fact, you don't like him, his behavior, what he said about this, the doctor and all, or Dr. Khan and all the rest. Those are irrelevancies. It seems to me you've either got to support the candidate or give a real reason why you are not doing so.
My question to you is this. Do you agree, as I have argued last week, that this is now open sabotage against Trump and that they're helping elect Hillary?
I think there's no question about it, but a number of these Republicans expect Trump to lose, and some of them, hope he loses. I would think many of the neocons, some of them are going over to Hillary already. They've got open doors to him. They said we would never support Trump. And, this was long before a lot of these controversies. And, I think, and you read columnists who say, well, when Trump loses, the rebuilding can begin. They're anticipating a loss, and they're welcoming a loss. There's no doubt about it, some of them. I don't know. I mean, others of them, look, if you want Trump to win, why don't you help him? And if you don't want him to win and you want him to lose, you ought to state honestly and coldly why.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and what are the policy disagreements? I've interviewed him a lot, and what I see when I interview him is he stays right on policy.
Well, he's right. What that clip you played a few minutes ago He's got an America first. He's exactly right. 25 years of free trade have deindustrialized us. You take a look at Nagasaki and Hiroshima today, and you take a look at Detroit and Baltimore and what they looked like in 1945 and what they look like now. And clearly, the deindustrialization, the export of factories and jobs and technology that goes with them, all of these things have weakened the United States. Now, we know how to make America great again in terms of trade. I mean, all our original founding fathers, Hamilton all the way up to Lincoln. My father was on the other side in the Civil War, but there's no doubt that from Lincoln to World War I, the United States became the greatest industrial power on earth by a policy of economic patriotism and economic nationalism up against the Brits. We did to the Brits what the Chinese are doing to us.
Yeah, well, you also warned. I actually said on the air last week that if Trump loses, I'm naming names. I'm blaming all those people that made promises and didn't keep them. I'm naming all the Republicans that have done everything they can do. For example, Paul Ryan has been more harsh towards Donald Trump than he's ever been towards Barack Obama and his agenda and Hillary Rodham Clinton and her agenda. Been absolutely more harsh. These guys have been more harsh towards Trump than they ever are. And here's another point, Pat. From my estimation, you want to understand the rise of Donald Trump, look directly at these people that are now opposing, or at least some of them. I'll take Ted Cruz out of that category. He did stand and fight as it relates to repealing and replacing Obamacare, and I applaud him for that. But all these guys, they're the ones that said they would repeal it and replace it. They're the ones that said they would use the power of the purse. They were the ones that were afraid of their own shadow and thought they'd get blamed by Obama for shutting down the government and didn't want to suffer the political fallout of that if they got blamed. They're the ones that said in 2014, Patrick Buchanan, that they were going to stop illegal, unconstitutional executive amnesty, and then they ended up funding it.
I think they believe that if Trump goes down or when he goes down, and if he goes down, that they will inherit the estate. I don't believe so. I think if they are seen as responsible in the same way that Rockefeller and Romney and Scranton were seen as responsible for the size of Goldwater's defeat, I think they're dead as far as being future leaders of the party. As I've written several times, whatever you say about him, Richard Nixon went to that convention, stood up, introduced Goldwater, praised him, said, I'm going to work for him all over this country, went out, worked for every Republican he could think of, and worked for Goldwater, and they lost in a huge landslide. But a lot of conservatives who had distrusted Nixon and been suspicious of him said, at the Pickett's charge of American conservatism, that guy was standing with us, and we're going to stand with him. And that is the reason Richard Nixon won the presidency of the United States, won the nomination in '68.
It's unbelievable. And you talked a lot about the history of all of this. You know, I do think that there is a rising nationalist populist movement, Pat. I mean, how many more Americans are going to have to lose their jobs before we realize that we've got to secure our border, because every person that crosses that border is in competition with 95 million Americans out of the labor force, and they're driving down wages for Americans that actually can get a job, which is too limited.
Well, that's, you're exactly right. Look, most of these folks coming in, you're coming across the Rio Grande or you're coming across in the southwestern desert or something like that. I mean, you're not headed straight for Silicon Valley to get a job as a computer whiz. A lot of these folks, they come in and they compete for working class jobs, and they compete for unskilled and semi-skilled labor. They compete against the African American and the Hispanic American folks, some of whom don't have high school educations or maybe only high school education. You got a huge labor market that it grows constantly, and that's one of the primary reasons wages do not go up. In real terms, wages have stopped going up really well since 1974, almost 40 years ago, and that is coterminous with this idea we're first of letting all manner of folks in here, 1 million a year legally, and I don't know how many 100,000 or million legally, and also all these foreign products coming in, destroying our factories. I don't know what we're doing to our working people. It used to be the middle class folks. This country was a country for the working and middle class. That's who it was made for. A lot of folks got real rich, Rockefellers in that crowd, but fundamentally it was for middle America. And that's what I hope and I believe that Trump believes in.
That's what I think he believes in, too, and that's what he keeps appealing to.
Sure, they're with him. They sense it.
Yeah, I think they do sense it. I think you're right. All right, let me ask this question. If you're Donald Trump, you see the controversies over this guy Khan. You see that he's been battling Cruz when I think he should be focused on Hillary and Obama only. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think that one of the problems is his opponents realize that you can distract the Donald. I mean, if you clip him from the side, he'll turn around and come after you right into the stands,
right
off the field.
By the way, Pat, that's my
back in the huddle.
That's more my old hockey days, Pat, where I used to battle and fight.
A lot of us, when we were younger, behave the same way, but you're in one of these things, you just keep marching slowly straight ahead.
So he really needs to discipline himself.
Huh?
Like I noticed in a tweet yesterday, he mentioned the mayor of Baltimore. And I'm like, the mayor of Baltimore is not your opponent. And I'm not being critical. I'm just saying it's not. She is meaningless to you.
Right about the mayor of Baltimore, but that's nothing the mayor of Baltimore would love more than to get in a good fight with Donald Trump.
It's like in 2007 and 8 when Obama mentioned me. At least, and I got to be honest here, it was crazy. Mentioned me at least, 10, 14 times. I was like, this is manna from heaven. This is gold.
You go right on. Let's play that clip. Sure.
Well, play the clip. We used it as the open for the show forever.
That was pretty good. I might have to put Mr. Burgess on Fox News. I'll put Mr. Burgess up against Sean Hannity. He'll tear him up.
But sure, that's exactly right. Anybody, I mean, you've been attacked by the heavyweight champion of the world, says he wants to fight with you.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I mean, and when we'd play it, people would laugh, and then somebody at some point got to Obama and said, you know what, Hannity uses every time you talk about him on the air, and all you're doing is helping this guy and making him the person.
Exactly. He brings the audience to you. They say, people about must be, say half the country at one point says, we're not too fond of this fellow Obama, and Obama's attacking Hannity. They said, hey, maybe we ought to listen to this fellow Hannity.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody knew who I was, probably. Half of them didn't know.
Well, now they knew you. It was great, great doing.
Yeah. All right. So let me ask you this: going forward, besides only going after Obama and Hillary, what else would you advise him?
I think the excerpt you mentioned. I think the idea of the jobs, bringing the jobs home. I think securing the border. I think the idea of making America great. The idea of investment in the infrastructure, building all these things. That's what he's famous for. And the idea, I think you ought to mean. And I tend to disagree with some of the Republicans, but I do realize the political appeal of America being first in militarily in every category, the strongest in the world, but then say we're going to be the strongest country in the world, but like Eisenhower and Nixon and Reagan and Bush won, I'm going to negotiate from strength, and we're going to try to avoid wars, but the way to avoid them is peace through strength, and do those the best of the past and the new issues he's got. I think is a winning hand. I mean, it won the Republican primaries, and initially a lot of the people in Republican primaries, I mean, even who might have been sympathetic, probably said, geez, isn't this Trump? The guy's, he's off a TV, a reality show or something. But they came to believe and follow him. He's got good cards if he will play them.
I think that's very well said. All right, Pat Buchanan, any prediction on who wins this thing?
Well, if it were held today, as I mentioned last week, I would, Hillary would. But look, as I wrote in that column, there's still a road to victory, and lots can happen, and have been happening.
Hey, by the way, how about an Iranian scientist spy who gets killed because of her emails?
Well, that's something that really ought to be looked at. But I would, the other folks ought to investigate that.
Yeah. All right, Patrick J. Buchanan, thank you.
Appreciate it. Good talking to you, Sean.